Today we're going to go over our hitting philosophy, our mechanics, and our approach. This is going to give you a whole inside look at how we at Ignite teach hitting and how we translate it to in-game success. First off, starting with our hitting philosophy. You want to hit the ball in the air as hard as you can. That's the number one thing we focus on. When you try to hit the ball on the ground consistently, it can definitely hurt your development long term. The most valuable batted ball is a ball hit in the air, pull side. You don't want to hit a pop-up, you want to hit it between 10 and 30 degrees. We're talking line drives and well-hit fly balls. A great way to think about it is a valuable offensive player makes less outs and gets more extra base hits. Speed can help you gain extra bases. Do whatever you have to do to get yourself to second base. Here's an example of some data about the most valuable batted ball. Ground balls have a slugging and an average very, very low. The average 239, the slugging percentage 258. On fly balls and line drives, that includes all fly balls and all line drives, the batting average is 411 and the slugging percentage is 785. Of course, ideally, you want to combine both a hard hit ball in the air. If you can hit a ball 95 at around 25 degrees, you're going to bat 500 on average, and your slugging percentage is going to be 1.5. All 100-mile-per-hour batted balls in major leagues have a batting average of 626. To further illustrate what batted balls look like at different angles and exit velocities, you can see these charts here. Every single ball is hit at 10 degrees, but it varies in velocity from 70 miles per hour, 80, 90, and 100. As you see, as the velocity increases, so do the extra base hits and the overall production. To illustrate that it's important to hit the ball hard, but also important to hit it in the air, you can see these charts show all batted balls hit 100 miles per hour at varying angles. In the middle, you can see 0 degrees. On the top right is 10 degrees, and in the top left is 25 degrees. As you can tell, a 100-mile-per-hour ball at 0 degrees, the best you're likely going to get is a single, maybe an occasional double. As you go to 10 degrees, you're going to get a lot of singles and a little bit more doubles. And as you get to 25 degrees, almost every batted ball is a double, a home run, or a flyout. This chart also illustrates exactly the sweet spot you want when you want to hit the ball hard. The darker yellow means the higher production, and you can see that peaks pretty much right past 110 exit velocity and just above 25 degrees in launch angle. If you are fast, one often approach is to try to use the ball on the ground as a weapon, thinking that you can use your speed. This chart here shows that in the major leagues, you only get about 0.1 expected runs added by having a little bit above average speed or elite speed compared to the slowest third. Whereas if you can just hit the ball hard, 100 plus at good launch angles, right, anywhere between 100 and 110, you can get up to 1 to 1.5 expected runs added, which dwarfs anything you can do on the ground despite how fast you are. A common pushback when you deliver numbers that show major league data is that it doesn't apply to high school or below levels. While some of that is definitely true, I wanted to show you this 11U baseball chart of data we tracked that shows just a little bit of a different story. As you can see that the line drives, fly balls, ground balls, and pop-ups were all put together in buckets depending on how many they were hit, how much of them were hard hit balls, and how many of them did they reach base safely. As you look at the top, the line drives, being only 20% of the balls in play, had a 79% hard hit ball percentage, and they reached base 74% of the time. That makes sense. Line drives is definitely something that everybody knows plays. If you look down below it at the fly balls, they were also about 20%, 19.3% of the balls, and actually 80% of them were considered hard hit balls, and they reached base 61%. So a little bit obviously less than the line drives, but still a really high percentage. More often than not, when they hit the ball in the air, they were on base. Ground balls by far were the most number of balls in play. Over half of the balls in play were grounders, but only 23% of them were considered hard hit ball. And despite that, only 46% of the time did they reach base safely, right? Pop-ups obviously are the worst. They were the lowest amount of balls in play, but you didn't get any hard hit balls, and they'd only reach base 14%. This chart really helps illustrate that even at the younger levels of baseball, you still want to hit the ball in the air because it gives you a little bit more room for error to get on base. And a real good way of thinking about this is it's a big field, right? And the outfield only has 3 guys standing out there. So if you hit the ball out there, it's going to be harder for them to cover that range. And so you have a better chance of getting the ball in play. One aspect of our hitting philosophy that definitely sets us apart from other organizations is our beliefs on sacrifice bunting and bunting in general. If you want to bunt for a base hit, that can definitely be encouraged and used as a weapon, but sacrifice bunting limits big innings and total runs scored over the course of a season. A big part of our philosophy is trying to score as many runs as possible. And this is true at every level you're at. Obviously, most of the data you can collect on this stuff is at the highest levels of Major League Baseball and obviously highest levels of college baseball. But being a coach at the high school level for 10 years, you can definitely add in a lot of data knowing that even though some of these numbers might not match up perfectly as far as the rate at which the outs are made and stuff are higher in college and professional ball, just a higher level of play, right? But the execution of bunts is usually worse in high school as well. So it tends to be a lot closer to what were the numbers we're seeing here, but it's hard to get a big data set. So I understand when people may think about in high school that bunting is a really good strategy. In our opinion, it sacrifices not only the big innings and the multiple runs scored, which these charts can show you that, but really I think the biggest issue is it shows that you're not going to be able to develop the players to be able to drive the ball in those situations. That's a super important part of being a good hitter, is learning how to have success and failure in situations where the team is counting on you to drive a run or move a runner with your bat. Always being asked to sacrifice bunt is going to take time at practice away from being able to learn how to hit, and it's also going to affect the confidence, especially at lower levels of play. Obviously, if you're a high-level college player, if you're in Major League Baseball, that's a different level. It's a different story a little bit, and depending on the situation, you might be asked to do a sacrifice bunt. But in general, if you're trying to develop a player from the youngest ages all the way through high school, it's really important that they learn how to drive the ball and hit the ball hard to move runners and not rely on bunting. Along those same lines are hit and runs. A big belief that we have is that hit and runs aren't necessarily worth the risk that you employ. Obviously, best case scenario, you get runners on first and third, maybe second and third if the ball's in the gap and the runner at third can score, right? But worst case scenario, you get a double play or you get a runner thrown out, and you might limit your amount of total runs you can score in that inning. Really, the big issue is it forces a player to swing, right? And then the goal is to try to hit a ground ball, which both of those two things we don't necessarily want to have to do. If it's not a great pitch to swing at, or if it's a pitch in an advantage count where I can drive it, I don't want a player to be worried about trying to hit a ball in a certain area on the ground to try to protect the runner. I would rather them learn how to drive the ball in the gap and try to be able to make that runner score. Obviously, as a base runner, you want that runner to go first to third on a single and first to home on a double. So the hit and run ideally can give you a little bit of an advantage in that. Maybe they can get a head start, but the risk that you employ if you're doing that, especially in a situation where you maybe have a runner who doesn't want to steal or isn't a high stolen base threat, or you're forcing the hitter to have to swing maybe at a bad pitch and they're trying to force an outcome that we haven't been training, which is to try to hit the ball in the air. We don't want to hit the ball on the ground, but the hit and run asks for that. So in general, it's better for development to focus on consistently trying to drive the ball in the air for line drives. And when you are in a situation where I need to move the runner over, do it with my bat. Learn how to hit the ball the other way, learn how to hit the ball in the air for a sac fly, learn those ways instead of relying on forcing the pitcher to make a mistake potentially, or on forcing a hitter to have to swing at something they're not ready to hit. In general, when it comes to steals, We believe that you should just run when you want to run. We really believe that the confidence and learning how to steal based on the pitcher tails, based on knowing your times to the different bases and working on your jumps, and then having a good understanding of what counts and what positions to run in and which ones aren't. I think that's the best way in instilling that in base runners, and then keeping them accountable. If they fall below 80, 75% threshold of success, then we have to make sure we tell them that maybe they don't have that green light anymore. But in general, it's a lot easier to teach them when to go, how to go, and work on those jumps than it is to try to give them, for say, a sign. A big part of our philosophy is it's really hard to give too many signs, and ideally you're not really giving any signs, right? If it's a situation that a player feels like they should bunt for a hit, or if it's a situation where a player feels like they should need to move a runner by hitting a sac fly or hitting a ground ball the other way or something like that, then that's something that should have been taught and is on the coaches to make sure that the players know and have practiced executing those situations, right? In the game, you really can't coach mechanics. The only thing you really can coach is your approach, your timing, and then maybe some adjustments that could happen. But, adding a ton of signs, a bunch of different, obviously we don't believe in the sack bunts and the hit and runs. So we're not going to do a lot of those typical things that coaches would call. But in general, you're going to want to make sure that you give the players the most autonomy they have. Teach them the game, and give them the most tools that you can to have success, and then let them learn how to execute those the best they can. You're definitely going to have some mistakes, but I think a big mistake coaches make is they try to coach a baseball game like if they can control the players and they can call these plays. But in reality, all you can do is teach your kids how to hit, throw, and catch the best you can, and live with the result on the field, and then learn from it. Overall, the hitting philosophy key points, we want to be aggressive at the plate and on the bases. I think in general, that's just the way you want to instill that mentality into your players, and we try to instill that to our players. You want to hit the ball hard in the air. That's number one. Doesn't matter what type of hitter you are, whether you're somebody who hits low line drives or you're somebody who hits a lot of home runs. Both of those are in the air, and we want to hit the ball to the outfield as much as we can. As a hitter, you want to be able to find your own way to get yourself to second base. That might mean you slug the ball in the gap. That could also mean that you are really fast and you're able to walk and you steal a base or two, right? Being able to get yourself to second base is the most valuable thing you can do as an offensive player. And players should have the confidence and skill to make their own decisions. That's a super important part. If we instill the right mentality inside the hitters, we train on the right stuff, then we know that they're going to be prepared for the situations that come up. And are they going to always have success? No, but they'll be able to learn and be better as they go, especially if you're working with young kids or even high school players. You really want them to focus on their development and learning how to come through in these situations. Next, we're going to go over how we view hitting mechanics in general. The first thing that's super important to understand is the myth of ideal mechanics. Every swing is different because every pitch is different. The best hitters in the world learn to move within a range to allow consistency, variance, and adjustability. It's really important that people let go of the idea that there is one specific swing, that if you can groove that swing over and over again, that's the key to being a great hitter. The truth is, there is no such thing as one specific way to swing a bat, right? There's going to be similar ranges, there's going to be similar movement patterns that we see arise depending on the level of hitter and just depending on their movement and the way that their body moves in general. But there is no one exact way that you can teach that's going to work for everybody. A great example here is Shohei Ohtani. These two pitches were both the highest and the lowest pitches hit for a home run in this season. And you can see that on the highest pitch and the lowest pitch, we're seeing different movement patterns. There's similarities, but there's definitely differences. And if he tried to take the exact same swing to both those pitches, he could not have that result. The three keys to an efficient swing, right? There's not one way to do it, but all great swings, they generate power and speed. right? They have bat speed that's relevant or higher to the level of play they're at, and they can hit the ball with authority, enough to get it to the outfield and usually to the fence or over the fence, right? A key number two is being quick to contact, right? This is super important, being able to hit high-speed pitches, right? If a swing can only work on a tee or off a soft toss, it's not going to work in a game situation. It can't satisfy being quick to contact, right? And number three, it's got to be adjustable, right? You have to be able to move to different areas of the zone. You have to be able to adjust to speeds, fast and slow, right? Different breaks, a lot of different things, right? The way that these three things can happen can look different depending on the hitter, but in general, all great hitters are going to have these three aspects, or at least do a really good job of two of them. One area that is a great way to look at the overall way the body moves is shouting out to Florida Baseball Armory and Franz Bosch's universal movement attractors, right? Obviously, we didn't come up with this. This is something that they're doing great work with Franz Bosch and the Florida Baseball Armory, but these are great examples of what movement truly looks like, right? There are definitely universal movement attractors, meaning that there's certain things that we see that the way the body moves that's universal when it comes to sports, when it comes to just moving in general, right? There's some that are more specific to baseball than others, but this graphic really shows you that in general, when we look at mechanics, we're mostly looking at how are we moving in relation to the attractors that encompass universal movement, right? A great example here, right, is proximal to distal action. That's something that most baseball players and coaches know, in that they want to use the ground and use the energy from their legs through their body and out, right? Well, proximal distal action means you're using your proximal, your closest, muscles and your parts of your body, and then using that energy to transfer it to your most distal. So in this case, if I'm rotating my hips and my trunk, that energy can get transferred into my arms, which are farther away. And that's an example of an attractor we look for. That can look different depending on how the hitter's anatomy is, how the hitter's body is in general, right? But in the proximal to distal action is going to be an attractor that you're going to see in all great hitters. Here's another example that's a little more specific to hitting, right? These are 6 attractors that we look at when we're looking at mechanics, right? Again, shout out to Florida Baseball Armory for this great illustration and understanding. The first is you want to keep those eyes stable, the head stable. You want to be able to get co-contraction of our back, hip, knee, and ankle when I'm doing my load, right? I want to be able to have some swing leg retraction, meaning that my front leg is going to come down from above, and then I'm able to co-contract that leg, right, when I need to. You want to make sure that upper body hitter's cage is always intact, meaning that we're contracting both of our arms, we're contracting our scaps behind our back, and we're able to keep that energy contracted and together all the way through into contact. We also want to make sure that we have optimal length and tension in our abdominals, meaning that we get the proper stretch, or some people will call it X factor stretch, of our hips and torso rotating in good sequencing, right? This allows energy to transfer up through our body. And dissipating energy with safe and smooth rotational deceleration. Deceleration is super important part of it, as it allows the energy to transfer from one segment of our body to the next. So these 6 attractors are how we look at a swing in general. Here are an example of hitting metrics by age and level, right? This gives you an idea of the ranges of some key metrics that we look at in-house and how they develop over time and the ranges they are in, right? Here's an example of what an efficient energy transfer and a swing would look like that's following all those movement attractors that we talked about, right? You can see the energy is transferring through the body by the hips rotating first, showing the green, then the chest, then the arms and the back. As the body's turning green, that energy means that it's being peaked out at that point. The rotational energy peaks out when the body is showing green there. So you can see the energy peaks out in the hips first, then the chest, then the arms, and then the bat. Shout out to Driveline Baseball for this visual. As we go through now into our hitting movements, we're going to look at our load and first move first, right? So the first part of our swing, we look for that co-contraction of that back leg and hip. We look for counter rotation of the hip and chest, and we want to make sure we're able to control this move as we go forward. This part sets us up to load, to be able to rotate fast, but it also helps our timing and make sure that we're able to be ready for the incoming pitch. These are different examples of how they look, of how the different loads can look. As you can see, there's not exactly one way to do it, but you're seeing the co-contraction of those back legs, you're seeing the counter rotation of the hip and torso, and that's allowing them to set up that energy to rotate, right? This one here, Pujols doesn't even pick up his leg, but you can still see all those same elements of a good load / first move, right? From there, we look at our launch and rotation. So once the load happens, the front foot's gonna get put down from our hip rotation. We're gonna see that swing leg retraction, or that front leg's gonna fall back towards our body a little bit. And as the hips rotate into the ground, you're gonna see the upper body start to delay, and the hands and the torso aren't gonna rotate right away. You're gonna see a stretch between the hips and the torso, and that energy is gonna send through the body. As the hips rotate and then stop, they send energy into the trunk, which then rotates and then stops and then into the body there. So this launch position comes right after our foot lands. Here's another example with Bellinger rotating, and you can really see the launch of the hips and the torso, and that's what delivers the barrel. This is what it would look like on a graph when we're doing a assessment at our facility. We put on motion capture, and this is what an efficient sequence looks like on a graph. Again, this can look different, as we saw, but depending on the different body, the way that it moves, the way that the hitter likes to move. But this graph is going to be pretty consistent amongst all the best players that transfer energy in the right order. You can see the hips are the red line, the green line is the torso, the blue line is the elbow, and then the hand is the brown line. And what you'll notice is the hips are rotating first. That's why they're climbing up that mountain first. They're going up, then they abruptly start going down. As soon as they start slowing down, then the chest gets energy from the hips and it speeds up. As it starts to slow down, then it goes to the elbow. And then as the elbow slows down, then it goes to the hand. And the energy flows as each segment gets faster, and they're also in order as 1, 2, 3, 4, right? This is mostly going to be consistent amongst all the best players, depending on what they have to adjust in the pitch location. But this sequence is what you're looking for when you're looking for energy transfer. Now, as part of our launch is our deceleration. So after we launch and rotate our hips and our torso, we actually have to slow them down in the same order. Our hips, our chest, our elbow, and then our hand. We also want them to slow down in that same order. So our hips should slow down first, or then our torso, then our elbow, and then our hand after contact. The deceleration is super important for energy transfer and also being able to stay consistent. The next section of the swing that we look at in our mechanics and our movements is our plane and connection, right? This is a great old Ted Williams visual from his book, right? Where you can see he's illustrating a very old concept that we've known for a long time, that you want your bat and swing plane to match up with the incoming pitch plane. As you can see, the incoming pitch is coming from high to low. The catcher is squatting, the pitcher is on the mound standing up, so the pitch is always going at a downward angle. A fastball is going to be somewhere around 5 to 8 degrees. A curveball or an off-speed pitch is going to be maybe 20 degrees down. So if your bat is moving upwards around 8 to 12 degrees, as you can kind of see in this photo, which is a little exaggerated, you're going to be on plane with the incoming pitch longer than if I'm flatter with my swing plane. As you can see on the bottom, the level stroke, it only is in line with the pitch plane for a shorter period of time. Now, this is important to understand. This is a 2D representation. This is not the full picture. If we look at the full picture here, we can see that not only does the bat plane need to rotate on the pitch plane, but it also needs to rotate 90 degrees or so around my spine. This illustration shows a professional hitter in our biomechanics, and you can see that the torso has the lined up with the bat at contact. So when you look at the torso, the shoulders at the top, you'll see a red circle. That red circle is illustrating exactly 90 degrees from the spine, right? Perpendicular. So you basically want your bat to line up with that rotation. And you can see this pro lines up almost perfect, right? And able to rotate along the spine. So in order to create that swing plane, a hitter has to rotate his torso and keep his bat approximately around 90 degrees from the launch portion until contact. Here's a couple other examples of what that looks like. You can start with your bat more straight up or even more down behind you, but by the time you go to launch and the time you make contact, you want it to be around 90 degrees. This is really important because it's the most efficient rotational way that my torso can transfer energy to that bat. Here's a couple more examples of what that looks like in a live view with Mike Trout rotating. You can see that bat's around 90 degrees around his spine as he's rotating, right? Here's Yelich, same thing. And here's Bregman. They all look a little bit different. Some more upright, some more bent over, but we're seeing 90 degrees to their spine is about where their bat is rotating around, right? Now, an important aspect of this is you don't want your body to lean back towards the catcher or forward, right? This is where we would start looking at posture and balance. This is the next aspect that we look for, right? In this video, you can tell that Mike Trout is maintaining his balance through the middle of his body as far as side to side, leaning towards the catcher or leaning towards the pitcher, right? All the way from the launch of rotation, all the way through contact. You can see his body stays right in the middle of that line, right? It's important to understand, though, that depending on the pitch location, you're gonna have more or less tilt over the plate, right? Your spine's gonna be more tilted over the plate or less depending on how high the pitch is. On the right side, you can see a lower pitch with Trout in the white jersey, whereas on the left side is a higher pitch with Trout in the red jersey. You can see the lower pitch, he's leaned over the plate more, whereas the higher pitch, he's a little bit more straight up and down, right? Here's an example of that, right? Another pitch from a different angle where you can really see how much tilt he has over the plate, right? And then on the bottom, you can see a freeze frame at contact of how the lower pitch, he has more tilt, his head's more over the plate, whereas on the left side, the higher pitch, he's away from the plate. But both of those, you can see he's not leaning forward or backward, meaning towards the catcher or towards the pitcher. He's just varying how much he leans over the plate, depending on how high or low the pitch is. The next section we're gonna look at is our adjustability, right? Another great shout out to Florida Baseball Armory is this graphic here of our cogs of adjustability. It's a great example of how great players learn how to adjust and build these cogs, as they put it, into their own swings to allow them to adjust in real time to pitches, right? And we can see you have timing mechanism, forward move, lead leg compression, creating the stretch or the hip and shoulder separation, and then your scapular. These are all different ways that hitters can adjust. Great hitters usually do 2 or 3 of them for sure. Some of the best in the world have all of them in their toolbook, right? Here's a couple of different examples of what that might look like, right? On the left, you see 2 different home runs by Max Muncy. One's a little bit up and in, one's a little bit up and away. We see slight differences in the way that their posture is, their timing, and the way that they fire, as far as do they fire right away or does their front knee kind of bend a little bit first before they fire to give them time? That would be the lead leg compression, right? On the right, we see Ohtani, a real example of that low and that high pitch rotation of the spine. You can see on the low pitch on the right side, he's really leaned over the plate, where on the left side, he's a lot more upright, and that spine is still staying about 90 degrees with the bat, right? Here's an example of 3 different pitches, high, low, and medium, as far as for Mike Trout. And you can see the lowest pitch, the one out in front, he's going to be leaned over the plate. The middle one, he's more upright. And then the highest one on the far left, he's going to be really upright. Here's another example of what it looks like to adjust to off-speed pitches, right? We can see that on the left side, the white jersey Mike Trout, we can see he fires as soon as his front foot lands. He's rotating those hips and torso right away. Whereas on the right side, you can see a slight hesitation with that front knee bending just a little bit to buy him time as he's recognizing that off-speed pitch. There's a great example of the lead leg compression that can show up in the adjustability of great hitters. Here's Mookie Betts with a similar low, medium, and high pitch, and you can see the differences in tilt of his body, right? And also the difference is amount of rotation. On the far right side, it's an outside pitch and he catches it a little deeper, and so he doesn't rotate as much. Whereas on the other two, they're more middle or in, and he's getting more rotation of the torso. Here's an example of 3 different angles of Mike Trout recognizing a curveball in the middle of a flight and being able to adjust to it. You can see, especially if you look at the middle video there, that front knee bends just a little bit, buys him a little bit of time while he keeps his hands back, that scap load, which is one of the cogs, and he also keeps the stretch, the hips and shoulder separation, which is one of the cogs, right? So he's doing about 4 of them here because we see the timing mechanism. He's able to read the pitch in the middle of the pitch flight. He's able to bend that front knee a little bit to buy time. He's able to keep his scaps loaded, and he's able to keep the stretch between his hips and his torso, all allowing him to be on time and drive this ball out of the park. Here's an example of how our arms can make adjustments, right? On the left side, we can see Mike Trout's launching and his arms end up being really straight towards contact. It's an outside pitch, it's a little bit low, so he's having to extend his arms to get to that pitch, but you'll notice the rotation and launch is very similar. Whereas on the right, we can see it's an up and in pitch, right? He's had to keep his hands really tight. He could not extend them, otherwise he wouldn't be able to get the barrel to that, right? And you'll notice if you look at the beginning of the launch, it's very similar. He's rotating the hips and torso, but then as the arms begin to go after the torso rotation, we can see that he's adjusting with how straight or how bent his arms are, depending on pitch location and speed. The last section here you'll want to see is the feel versus real. It's really important to understand that when you feel something as a hitter, that might not be what's actually happening. It could also be something that is just what you need to feel to make sure your body moves. A great example here is Alex Bregman. Let's listen.
Everybody knows that naturally your body is going to turn and you're going to end up like this at the finish, and everybody just sees that like, oh yeah, the rotation. Well, for me personally, I never ever think about rotation at all. I think I have two flashlights right here on my hip pointing that way. I'm on my shoulders, on my hips, on everything, my feet. And all I am trying to do, the only thing I look for is when I load to have my hands travel high across my chest forward like this, the knob of the bat get out there past the inside part of the baseball. I am trying to do this while keeping everything facing directly that way. Now, of course, it's not going to happen, but that's how my brain has to think in order to stay close and not spin off the baseball.
Though his thought process is to keep from rotating and take his hands as far inside as he can, we can actually see that he's rotating his hips and torso to be able to deliver that barrel, as we see in the elite hitters at Transfer Force. So this just shows that the feel of the hitter might not always match up to the real, and it's important for each hitter to figure out what feel they need to get to the right movements that will work for their body. So at the end of the day, these are what matters when it comes to hitting mechanics, right? The things that matter are, do you generate power and speed? Is it quick to contact? Can you hit high-speed pitches? Are you adjustable? Can you adjust to speeds, locations? The things that don't matter are ideal mechanics, right? There's no such thing. How a swing looks to a coach, and one-size-fits-all mechanical models. Now we're gonna go over our approach to in-game hitting and how we look at creating success for hitters. The approach key points. Number 1, having a hunter's mentality and being ready to attack fastballs. Number 2, looking for our zone versus looking for a specific pitch type. Number 3, timing our approach based on the pitcher. And number 4, focusing on quality at bats as our golden star. Hunter's mentality. What does it mean to be a hunter? We always talk about when you are a hunter, you're very aware and hyper-focused on your target. If you are hunting a specific animal, then you know exactly what type of animal you are looking for. You are always locked and loaded and ready and focused for when that animal arrives to be able to attack. Well, hitters have to have the same type of mentality. They have to step in to the on-deck circle, or even before then, with the mentality of, I'm ready to attack. As we look at these different numbers based on each count, we can see really the only bad counts to hit in are the ones with 2 strikes. Every other count that does not have 2 strikes is a 300 plus batting average. At the minimum is 319 at 0-1, right? Now, these are obviously major league numbers, but it goes to show you at lower levels, the pitches that you're facing are not as good as major league hitters, right? But they're still hitting at a super high rate on any count that's not 2 strikes. So the moral of the story is if you can attack and not get yourself there, then you'll be ready to go. It doesn't mean you got to chase any pitch in the dirt or whatever pitch is thrown, right? A hunter is looking for a very specific animal or a very specific thing. It's not just whatever animal comes by, right? So it's the same thing with a great hitter. You're not just going to swing at a curveball in the dirt because you want to attack, but you're not going to let a fastball go down the middle either because you're ready and locked in for that. Being a hunter's mentality is the most important mentality aspect to instill in a good hitter. Next, we want to look at looking zone versus pitch type, right? This is a chart from the right-hand batter's perspective, which would be on the left-hand side there, right? And the catcher, we are the catcher in this view, right? And so what we can see is that on all counts, all pitches, Mike Trout hit the ball in 2018 very well and had a high slugging per pitch type in his zone, which was down and a little bit in, right? Now, anything up or away, especially up and away, he definitely didn't do as well on, right? But he hammered everything in that zone, right? This is JD Martinez from that same season. His zone's a little bit bigger, right? He covers the strike zone at the top of the zone maybe a little bit better. So that's where his zone is. He can't chase too much outside the zone, obviously, right? But his zone is over the middle there, taking up mostly inside, not so much on the outer third or outer part of the plate, right? Now, as we see, a lot of different pitches can come in to those zones, right? These are the different kind of shapes that you might see as a hitter. Some are like fastballs up in on the top left there. You can see that those are coming in a lot more straight. They don't have as much drop to them, right? Then, you know, to the right's more of like a slider. And then on the bottom, there's definitely more of a breaking ball that has a lot more depth. And so you can see that some of these pitches are ending up in some of those zones that are good, right? If I have the approach that I'm only looking for a fastball, I might get a great off-speed pitch right in my zone that I can crush, right? But because I'm not ready to hit any pitch in that zone, I'm not going to be ready to hit it. I take it, and then now I'm letting pitches that I can drive go away. So it's really important to look for the zone and not just the pitch, right? When we're looking for off-speed, it's definitely got to be up in the zone, right? You're not going to usually have a lot of success at breaking balls in the knee, right? This is a great example of what one might look like, right? You can see a college pitcher throwing one. It kind of comes up out of his hand, and that's an easy visual for a hitter to see. If a breaking ball kind of comes up out of the hand of a pitcher, then it's probably going to land, you know, more middle, some place where I can hit it, right? So this is an example of seeing it up in the zone. Right now, if he was just looking for a fastball down the middle and not looking for any pitch, then he wasn't going to be able to drive that one, and that's a home run. Right? Next, we want to look at timing our approach based on the pitcher, right? So this is super important that really gets overlooked. You have to be able to time the pitcher. Every single pitcher is different. I can't go into every at-bat against multiple different types of pitchers with the same approach to my timing, right? As we said at the beginning, that no pitch type is the same, no swing's the same. So we have to make sure that we're getting ourselves in on time, right? So the goal, what does that look like? Our front heel in our load should land when the ball is approximately 15 to 20 feet away from home plate, right? Obviously, if it's a slower pitcher, maybe a little bit closer, right? But in general, 15 to 20 feet is where the ball should be, right? So it's a little bit past the cut of the grass if you're on a full-size field, right? And now we want to make sure that when I'm on deck, I'm looking and I'm watching the pitcher and I'm testing it and saying, okay, when I do my load, is my foot landing when the ball is approximately 15 to 20 feet away. If I'm on deck and I take my first load and I see, oh my goodness, that ball is, 25, 30 feet away from home plate where my foot landed, then I know that was too early. Whatever timing I used looking at the pitcher ended up being too early. So what I have to do instead is adjust it, right? So a couple of easy methods you can look at, right, is if I have a fast pitcher, right, I need to start my load early, right? Now this is depending on what kind of load you have. If you have a no stride, early is gonna look different than if I have a big leg kick, right? But generally, I'm gonna start my load early, so maybe right before leg lift, or right before the first move, or right as he starts his motion, I'm gonna start my load, right? That way I get my foot down in that 15 to 20 foot window, and then I wanna think maybe getting the bat head out and pulling it, right? He's a fast pitcher, right? Now if it's a medium pitcher or just an average pitcher, a level you see consistently, then I'm probably gonna start my load closer to handbrake. So when his hands separate, that's probably when I'm gonna start taking my load, right? And then I'm gonna think middle instead of thinking pull side, so that way I can stay on it a little longer. If I'm facing a real slow pitcher, I might wait till the ball actually releases out of his hand before I start my load, right? And then I want to think the other way, right? These are all just general ideas, right? Frameworks you can work in, but they give an example of how you can time your load based on what the pitcher is doing, right? And really, that's the number one question you should ask yourself after an at-bat is, was I on time, and did I time the pitcher well? A couple examples of what this looks like. This is Bryce Harper, right? You can see as he's on deck, he's figuring out, when do I need to pick my leg up? When do I need to start my load, right? So he's watching that pitcher and he's getting that locked in, right? We can see the same thing here, right? We can see there's a hitter in the box, and we can see the hitter on deck is in sync loading with them. They have similar size loads, and you can see they're going pretty much around the same time, right? This is even in BP here. We can see, one guy's in the box, one guy is looking to time up the BP pitcher or pitching machine, but this is something that has to be ingrained all the time. There could be nothing wrong with your swing at all, but my timing can be off and it can totally affect with the success I have, right? Here's another example of it, right? In a game where you're watching Yelich down here in the bottom corner. He's doing his load. He's picked out his time when the pitcher starts moving, when he's gonna go, and to make sure he's on time. The two-strike approach. This is a big, important part of the overall approach, right? The first part is you're a hunter. You're a hunter's mentality. You want to hit that first, not the first pitch, but you want to be early in the count. You want to be ready to drive the ball. If you do get the two strikes, right, then what you want to do is you want to hunt the outside fastball or hunt the high fastball. Some guys, they want to hunt the high and outside fastball. This is really important because this allows you to see the ball a little bit deeper. It allows you to not maybe be as susceptible to swing at a curveball in the dirt or a changeup that's out of the zone, right? It might help you lay off a high fastball that, maybe you chase. Obviously, this is going to be dependent on the type of hitter that is in the box, but in general, right, hunting an outside fastball or a high fastball are great strategies to make sure that when we have two strikes, we're not going to give in and be susceptible to chasing and being able to stay in the zone a little bit better. The last part of it, and this is what encompasses every aspect of the approach, right? This is how you grade yourself as a hitter, is quality at bats, right? And I know that a lot of people talk about quality at bats. This is how we define the quality at bats, right? You get on base, right? Number one. That's obviously a great at bat. If I end up on base, doesn't matter how I get there. If I'm on base, that's a quality at bat. If I hit the ball hard, right? That might be a line out. That might be a home run. They look differently. That might be a single. Hitting the ball hard is always a quality at bat, right? If I make an out, I advance a runner, that's a quality at bat. So let's say I have a runner at second and there's no outs and I ground out to second baseman and he moves over to third, that's a quality at bat, right? Say I have a runner at third and I hit a sac fly, obviously that's a quality at bat, right? If I'm making out and advance a runner, that's quality, right? If I see 6 pitches or more in an at bat, right? This is a big one because I could get out, I could strike out on 6 pitches. But if I made that pitcher throw me 6 pitches, and if every hitter on average is making the pitcher throw around 6 pitches, you're gonna make them work and get them deeper into the game and allow for mistakes by the pitcher to happen more often and for your hitters to be able to see the pitch types more, right? See more of the pitcher and have more success. As we know, the more times you see a pitcher, the more likely you're gonna have success against them. So being able to see a lot of pitches, even if you make an out, is a quality at bat. And then obviously, getting a base hit, right? Now, most people look at getting a base hit as the only way, especially young hitters. They think getting a base hit is the only way to have a quality at bat. It's really important that they look and say, I have 4 other ways that I can have a quality at bat, and all those are just as helpful to the team. And if I look back and I have a super high quality at bat percentage, 70-80% of my at bats throughout the course of a season are quality at bats, I'm going to have the batting average, all of the numbers that I'm looking for. But if I focus on only getting hits, it's going to be hard to be consistently having quality at bats. So the key points to the approach, we want to have that hunter's mentality, right? We got to be ready to attack. We can't be taking fastballs for strikes very often. We want to look zone versus pitch. We don't want to give up on pitches just because they're not the pitch type we necessarily are looking for. We want to hunt our zone, and we want to be able to drive the ball there. We want to time our approach based on the pitcher. We want to make sure that we're getting in rhythm on deck, making sure we know when we got to load, and making sure that our approach is adjusted based on how fast or slow the pitcher throws or what type of pitches they throw. And then fourth, we want to make sure that we're having as many quality at-bats as possible. There's 5 ways to have a quality at-bat, and keeping that in mind really helps keep the hitter focused on the things and the process that will keep them successful. And if the entire team buys into that, then the team will have a great offensive approach.